Hey, my name is Kara. I'm an ultrasound tech, and let's talk today about three abnormal findings in the anatomy scan that we may see, but are usually nothing to worry about. Now, it is not to say that if all three of these are present, then it is nothing to worry about. What an isolated finding means is only one of these things is seen, and therefore, when only one of these things is seen and nothing else is abnormal, it's usually nothing to worry about. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is an echogenic intracardiac focus. What this means is a bright spot on the heart. And I know this may sound scary when we say there is something in baby's heart, especially when heart issues are actually the most common congenital birth defect. But with this type of finding, it is essentially just a small spot of calcium on the heart muscle. And it is actually so common in those of Asian descent that we don't even consider it a soft marker when we see it on those babies. It is actually found in up to 5% of pregnancies, so it's actually pretty prevalent. And when there is no other abnormal finding besides the echogenic intracardiac focus, we don't need to actually follow it up in the third trimester. And if it is not more echogenic than bone, as in it is not brighter than bone, which by the way, it normally never is brighter than bone, it's not even something that we write on our tech sheets or that we even have the radiologist report on anymore. So, unless there are other concerns present or there is an increased risk of chromosomal abnormalities, this is not something that we even follow up in the third trimester. And if it is seen on baby in the second trimester during the anatomy scan as the only abnormal issue, then it is really nothing to worry about the vast majority of the time. The second finding in the second trimester that is not anything to worry about if it's seen in isolation is a single umbilical artery or a two vessel cord. Now, the umbilical cord is what I am referring to, and usually it is composed of two umbilical arteries, which job is to bring the blood from baby back over to mom via the placenta. And then it also has one umbilical vein, which is actually going to supply blood to baby from mom. So in this abnormality, there is only one umbilical artery instead of the usual two. And therefore, instead of having the normal three vessels in the umbilical cord, we are only seeing two vessels. Now, this can be associated in a small number of cases with a decrease in fetal growth in the third trimester, which is why we do end up needing a follow up for growth in the third trimester if we do see this during the anatomy scan. And it is also important to note that when we see a single umbilical artery, it does have a slight increase in the chance of baby also having heart and kidney issues, as well as a chromosomal abnormality such as trisomy 21. But again, with all of those issues, usually there are more things present than just the single umbilical artery. So if this is the only thing that we see on ultrasound in the anatomy scan, the only thing that is going to be done is a follow up scan in the third trimester for growth. And because these vessels actually end up shriveling up and then just shrinking away after birth, there will be no follow up for growth after baby is born. And in the vast majority of cases, again, it is nothing to worry about. And many babies that we scan with the single umbilical artery or two vessel cord are actually totally fine in the third trimester for growth. And it's only a very small percentage of babies that the growth is actually affected in the third trimester because of only having the single umbilical artery. And lastly, let's talk about choroid plexus cysts. So, what you need to know about the choroid plexus is that this is a structure in the baby's brain, and it is actually responsible for making spinal fluid. How the spinal fluid gets out into baby's brain is actually through these finger like projections, but sometimes there can be some blockages in those projections, and therefore it can cause a backup or like a blockage. And that shows up to us as cysts in the choroid plexus on ultrasound in baby's brain. Now, I know this sounds a little bit scary when we say essentially that fluid is accumulating in baby's brain, but it is actually a benign finding if there is nothing else present that we find in the anatomy scan on baby. And it usually resolves by itself by the time the third trimester rolls around. If, though, mom has an increased risk of having a baby with trisomy 18, then it is taken more seriously and further testing will be done. But in the absence of any other abnormalities, if we are seeing choroid plexus cysts in the second trimester anatomy scan, then we are most likely going to follow up in the third trimester just to ensure that they have resolved. but we actually found that we were overcalling choroid plexus cysts. So now, unless they are over 3 millimeters, we don't even comment on them. So again, this is another finding where if this is the only finding that we see in the second trimester that is considered abnormal, we are going to go ahead and follow up in the third trimester, but in most cases, they are resolved by then, as in we don't see them anymore in the third trimester. And in the absence of no other abnormal findings, this has a great prognosis and will not lead to any sort of long-term complications for baby. So hopefully this video has been helpful. And like always, if you guys have found this informative, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. And I am also on TikTok, so check out my videos on there as well.